There is a ton for us to talk about tonight with the front bench. Joining me this evening, former BC Premier Christy Clark. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Marco Mendicino is former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal cabinet minister. He's now a senior counsel and strategic advisor for Castles. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is here. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. And Tony Clement served in senior roles in Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper's cabinet. He's now CEO of Tony Clement International. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Just a note, I just really quickly want to give the control room a heads up. If we're able to re-rack that clip from the Prime Minister, I would like to play it for the panel and for the audience so we have a sense of exactly what was said during today's break. So please let me know in my ear if that is possible to play at some point. Marco, I'll start with you. I think that will be ready in a moment. So I'll just get your initial read on, I guess, like what the strategy was behind following up what was a big splash in Davos with today's speech.
Well, I think the two speeches have to be seen as one whole. The Davos speech, which is one for the books, and today's speech, which he delivered in Quebec City at the Citadel, which was no coincidence. I think the Prime Minister did three things. One, he laid out a core thesis, which is that Canada, for all of its failures and for all of its flaws, is a country that has chosen to coexist over conquering and conflict. And while there are sometimes stretches of times where the values that underpin those choices are untested, this is not one of those times, which leads to the second thing that he did, which is defining the moment. And this really builds on what he laid out at Davos, that we are living in a period of rupture, that the old system is dead, and that we have to stop pretending that it isn't. And candor and honesty and respect is a way in which we can embark on a new system, one that appeals to many of the middle powers who for a long time I think have been frustrated by the coercion and the pressure that we have seen in particular over the last year, and that if we bind together on common interests and forge new deals, that will be a countervailing force to the uncertainty. And then the third thing is he set the course. And so I think, again, internationally, the Prime Minister has started to forge some new deals. He is racking up some big wins and some big points, 12 deals in a very short period of time. And I think that there is a lot of prosperity that will come from those deals. But domestically here at home, it's important that we also see a government that is focused on affordability, on creating new jobs, on creating housing. And so I think what he concludes is really by saying we have to move fairly, but we have to move fast. And that Canada isn't defined by any other country. We are defined by the strength of each other.
Okay, let me pick up on that because that clip is ready. I'll play it and then we'll continue the conversation.
And in a time of rising walls and thickening borders, we can demonstrate how a country can be both open and secure, welcoming and strong, principled and powerful. I said we had to do two things. The first is to be a bastion. The second is to be a beacon, an example to a world that's at sea. Canada can't solve all the world's problems, but we can show that another way is possible, that the arc of history isn't destined to be warped towards authoritarianism and exclusion. It can still bend towards progress and justice.
James, if the intent was as Marco laid it out, did the speech deliver on that?
No, mostly because of the infrastructure around the speech. Specifically, I'm talking about the timing. If it was an address to the nation at 2 o'clock Eastern, it's probably not the window that you're looking for. 11 o'clock in the morning, 90% of Canadians were at school, at work, taking care of their lives, as opposed to witnessing, I think, a major keynote speech. That'll come for later. The speech today in Quebec City, it was a good speech. It was a lot of, sort of frankly typical Liberal rhetoric in the most part. I think the most significant speech and the meaningful one, of course, is the one that happened in Davos. For that, the Prime Minister deserves kudos and applause. I think he was dignified, substantive, thoughtful, and I think he framed what was happening and continues to happen in the global sphere in a very thoughtful and meaningful way. And I think it was a very, very important speech. Today was more, I think, a look ahead to the kind of framing that the Liberals will use domestically in an election campaign should one come in the next 3 to 6 months. Everything will change, probably with the midterms and all that. But the Quebec speech was about, I think, my view, was road testing domestic narrative narrative, trying to bridge what happened in Davos to Canadians. And I think, as an observer of these things, I think it was some hits, some misses, a lot of cliche coming out of the caucus or of the cabinet meeting and going into Parliament when it resumes. I think more concrete action, less speeches. Let's get on with some more substantive building blocks of accomplishments that Canadians can be reassured by.
Yeah, there was a bit of a bit of an election, like the Choose Canada. Lisa Raitt was on earlier in the day when we aired the speech, and she was saying that'll make for a good election slogan. What were your impressions of the two speeches and their significance?
I think after Davos, which I think was the most consequential speech I've ever heard a prime minister make in our history, at a very consequential moment for us, and it really was an incredible thing to watch, a 17-minute speech that delivered so much kind of emotion and information for Canadians. But I think he needed to connect it to what Canadians are thinking about right now. And one of the problems that he's had is that in talking about all of this stuff, he's not talking about the number one issue that Poilievre is very focused on, which is affordability. So you heard in that speech, he was talking about affordability. He was talking about trying to make sure that life is easier for Canadians, and then bridge that to this is why we're doing it. So what I heard in it was, it's about affordability. This is really about Canadians and making Canada work. Second, I heard him say, don't be afraid. This is going to be hard. And it is going to be hard. We certainly have heard the Americans respond to the speech already. And the third was, this is the path. We are setting out a new path, and we're working on it to get there. And we need you to understand that things are happening here. It's not going to be fast and easy. There's going to be some pain, but it's the right path to try and take. So again, not the most consequential speech that he'll ever make, but compared to especially the one in Davos, but I do think it was one with an important message politically for Canadians, because it's pretty easy to hear what the Americans are saying, get scared, and then boy, you change, we change tracks. He needs electorally, politically, but also I think just as a leader of a prime minister, he needs Canadians to stick with him on this path.
I thought it's interesting, kind of bridging all those ideas. Mr. Poilievre's statement today that came kind of late in the day, interestingly, on the Davos speech a few days after it, Tony, was one of the first ones I've ever seen from him that started off with praise for the government, or in this case, more specifically, the prime minister, but then kind of got into what everybody's been saying, which is like, you can't just talk about the big themes and the important stuff with the U.S. You've got to tie it to domestically Canadians' lives and improve on them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think Mr. Poilievre's statement today, I read it quite closely, does in fact do that. It says, look, yes, you can have great speeches. That's fantastic. But Canadians are hurting right now. Grocery bills are very high. And of course, if we are going to be successful as a sovereign nation, what that means is that that we have to have better public policy. We do have to build those things. We have to remove legislation which is still in place from the Trudeau years that impedes our ability to be competitive, to grow, let's get moving on the interprovincial trade barriers, which are still in place mostly after 9 months of talking about it, just like old Canada. And so I think he was right to call that out. I do have to quibble with Mr. Poilievre. I'm the only skunk in the Garden Party that doesn't think the Davos speech was a good speech. I thought it was trite in places, and I thought that his central thesis involving Václav Havel was inherently wrong. I mean, what Havel was talking about with the shopkeeper parable was a whole authoritarian system that was based on a lie, whereas yes, I mean our system, the capitalist system, globalization has a lot of problems with it, but it wasn't deliberately trying to deceive anybody. So I thought it was a weird thing for him to do, especially juxtaposing that with his Beijing trip, where he said that there's a new world order standing beside Xi Jinping. I still am grappling with that, Vashi. I don't know why we would want to declare a new world order with the Chinese Communist Party right beside us, but I'm sure we'll get some answers sooner or later.